Welcome to the Business Perspectives for November 10th, 2011. Tonight, we talk to the private sector players affected by the 8th Amendment. Please join us. We'll be right back.
The Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Western Union, has recently been distinguished by receiving the 5-Star Quality Service Award from Western Union.
The 5-Star Quality Service Award signifies that the Chamber holds the gold standard in outstanding customer service, in being courteous, efficient, and transparent in the services we provide.
Can you receive superior customer service at any of our chamber locations?
Yes. Come and visit us today!
Brothers Habet's amazing 28th anniversary sale. Brothers Habet has been serving Belize for 28 great years, and we're celebrating bigger than ever with a month full of great deals and savings like 30% off select Moen products, 30% off butane water heaters, 20 to 30% off Hunter fans, 20% off all windows, 20% off all power tools and shop tools, 30% off compact fluorescent bulbs, and up to 80% off clearance items in our super yard sale. Also, win up to $3,000 cash this Christmas when you buy Burglar paints. Too much deals for one commercial, so see store for details. Come, celebrate with us for huge pre-Christmas savings all month long. Brothers Habet's amazing 28th anniversary sale. 115 Barak Road, we're open through lunch.
Good evening and welcome to the Chamber's Business Perspectives. I am your host, Celine Cleland Gomez. The Business Perspectives is brought to you by Brothers Habet, The Angelus Press, Pandora's Window Box, and Idea Lab Studios. It is also sponsored by the Chamber's Western Union franchise, the only countrywide network and the only network with a 5-star award for quality. So this is the last in a 4-part series on the 8th Amendment, and to date we've discussed the legal issues, the economic issues, we've delved into the matters of expropriation and nationalization and tried to explain the implications of each. And tonight we talk to the private sector players who are affected by the 8th Amendment. We take on the issue and we ask the question, what is your perspective on the 8th? And a well-run utility where efficiencies are optimized, there's value for money, and an appreciation for the social welfare aspects is in the public interest. Is this better achieved in the public sector or the private sector, with perhaps efficient and effective regulation? My guests tonight are the former chair of BTL, Mr. Dean Boyce, and the former CEO of BEL, Mr. Lin Young. Gentlemen, thank you and welcome.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tim.
So, Mr. Boyce, let's take on the matter of BTL first, because this is one of the issues that have been on the nationalization agenda for, I think, the last 2 years at least. BEL is a newer player on the scene, and so we'll get to you in the next segment. But again, like I said, feel free to add anything to the discussion in the first segment. So, can you explain then? In the series of shows that we've had this ongoing discussion about the issue of compensation, and I think it was in the second show, there was an assertion that, you can't compensate somebody who doesn't want to be paid, somebody who wants the asset back as opposed to being paid, and that nationalization, in effect, had not been accepted by BTL. What is your perspective on that? And then explain to me why, if there is one, why is there an insistence on reacquiring the asset as opposed to accepting compensation?
August 2009, the government nationalised for the first time the company. Mm-hmm. The claim and the justification in the regulations was that the company was not performing the way it should do. Mm-hmm. And they produced extensive information to support their case. verbally, orally, in the House, it was made clear that there was another justification, that because of the influence of certain parties in the management of the company, that was really the reason, the underlying reason, why the company was being nationalised. The nationalisation, we challenged the nationalisation. Anybody that owns an asset has a right to those assets. They were properly acquired and they've been managed in accordance with the laws of the country. And we challenged the nationalisation, went through the courts. The Court of Appeal decided that there were two parts to the challenge that the government had brought. The other part was the fact that the BTL Employees Trust, who I am one of the two trustees, was not a valid trust, didn't exist. I wasn't a valid trustee. The Court of Appeal said, yes, it is a valid trust, and yes, I am a valid trustee, and I am able, therefore, on behalf of the trust, to seek restitution of the shares, if that is what I'm pursuing. And after the 2-year process, they concluded that the very detailed justification provided by the government for nationalising the company were not supported in any way. So they threw it out completely, and they reversed the nationalisation. And as a result of that, we attempted to retake the company. If you remember,
You had it for what,
the
about
one,
20 minutes?
We had it for one board meeting on the night of the decision, and at the time the property had been vacated by the former board, and the Prime Minister had gone on the TV stating, okay, well, he would accept the fact that, okay, perhaps we were a little hasty in walking in that same day, but he would accept the will of the court. And later that evening, that had turned about, and the statement was that no, they were going to renationalise it, and so they renationalised the company, giving exactly the same grounds for the nationalisation that they gave in the first place. So nothing had changed. So the Court of Appeal's analysis and its ruling on the validity of the takeover will be the same when it goes through the process. So you have to look at this. I mean, we're talking about the nationalisation of the company, and we're talking about the ownership, and we're talking about personal issues between different people, and it's completely missing the point.
Yeah.
The point is telecommunications is one of the key industries in the country. Most people in the country, and therefore the government, all they're really interested in is getting a whole range of affordable telecommunications services. That's what they're looking for. So deep down, they're really not necessarily bothered whether they personally can invest in BTL or not, whether it's managed by the government or not. What they want is, if you look around the region, they want what they've got. Right? They want the latest services. So they don't want to wait until 2011 for BlackBerry.
Sure.
They want it 3 or 4 years ago. They want the same rates that they're getting in Mexico or Barbados or Jamaica. So that's what they're looking for. And the government policy, telecommunications policy, must surround achieving that objective. So the guy in the street can get access to the services, and he can afford to get access to those services. And if he wants some additional services, the latest gadgets, well, you're not necessarily going to get them tomorrow, but you need to get them in a reasonable time, and you shouldn't have to wait too long. Now, that's not what this argument's been about at all.
No.
I'm not quite sure
Well,
whose statistics somebody's looking at to think that a government-run telecommunications company is the way to go.
let's take on the issue, though, of the purported reason for the nationalization. And one of the key ones would be the exploitative measures. And those are the words that were used, the exploitative measures, and a reduction of same by nationalizing the company. Those measures would of course be reduced because now it's owned by the government of Belize and all the I don't know exactly what was referred to as exploitative measures, but I've heard management fees being thrown around, those types of things. Do you care to take on that issue tonight and explain to us where does that come from, and why was that even a part of the conversation as it related to the nationalization of BTL? And what is the issue on that? What is the real story behind that?
Somebody wanted a change of ownership of BTL. The court has shown that the justifications that they provided, supposedly, for nationalizing the company were not sound.
Understood.
Okay, so management fees, for example, there is an effort involved in managing a company.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you would expect some sort of compensation for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't say that didn't exist, because it obviously would do, and it will do in all circumstances, in all countries, in all companies. So that exists.
So that is in itself not unusual.
If I look at no, it's not unusual at all. If I look at the last few years, since privatisation, and at the end of 2002, competition was allowed into the market.
Yes.
If you look at those, say, the last 10 years, this is long after the good old days of monopolies and government ownership. The number of people having access to telecommunications, personal telecommunications, went up by 500%. If you look at prices, on average, they went down by 75%. So these are the effects of nationalisation and privatisation. Mm-hmm. And if you look at WTO, of which Belize is a member, it talks about the importance of privatising and nationalising.
It does.
Same goes for the International Telecommunications Union. They talk about the same thing. They also talk, this is the ITU, they talk very clearly about the concerns over a government being an owner in the industry, being the referee and a player.
Yeah.
Right, so they talk specifically about that. They talk about the perceived fairness of it, mm-hmm. and the ability to have a regulator that's completely independent.
But Dean, if I could interject, don't you think that this whole issue of privatization and public or private ownership is being mixed with really the question of foreign as opposed to local ownership? Because really what I think is happening is that this government is saying that they don't want foreigners to own the public utilities. I think that is really the base of it. And I think that what they really want is that they want to have either local investors or the government control the public utilities.
So we're not adverse to private ownership of the utilities. We just don't want it to be held by foreigners.
I think that's what it is. Mm-hmm. I really think that's what it is, you know, because when you really look at
it would appear that way, but
those
are not the reasons.
I know, but I'm saying that the reason has been put out there, or we own it and all that, is just a cover for the fact that really, what is at the bottom of it is that when they talk about exploitative measures and all that, it's really what they're saying is that, oh, these foreigners are taking money out of the country, and we should be keeping those monies in the country itself, which you know,
that borders on xenophobia, and we won't.
It is xenophobia.
We won't.
And why?
We will hope that
why
is
are you
not
going
the
to push
case.
that in the public utilities? You have the banks that are owned by foreigners. You have the oil company. I mean, ESSO has a monopoly in bringing fuel into the country. And if you really want to lower, for example, in the BL's case, if you really want to lower energy prices, you have to control oil prices, because that's what drives energy prices.
Yeah.
So this idea about taking over BL, we have it, we control it. If you really want to do something, take over the oil companies.
Yeah, and I will get back to that. But we have a short time, a short window to talk about both nationalizations. But I want to know, at the time that you were approached by the government of Belize, was there a good faith offer on the table to either say, look, I'm going to take your asset, this is what I'm going to offer you in return, or to either say, look, the exploitative measures have to stop, the market structures have to be adjusted, if you do X, Y, Z, we'll let you continue running the company?
The regulator is supposed to regulate the industry. We received absolutely no communication in the recent years, 2005 to 2009, to say that we were not doing a good job. Right? So regardless of anything else, right, that is the regulator's role.
It is.
Okay.
It should be.
So how are we to know, right, that they had a problem with our prices, had a problem with the network deployment?
So there was absolutely no communication on these issues with you prior to nationalization?
There was nothing from the regulator. The government would argue with us about certain matters.
But did the government say that they want the company?
No, not until we'd heard a rumour back in 2000 and whenever it was, I can't remember, 2008. We'd actually heard a rumour, and it was a concern to us that they were going to do something ridiculous like nationalise the company. And as my rumour was that the one I heard was that within the government they decided it really wasn't sensible, so it didn't proceed. And then the nationalisation we heard on the Friday, and it took place on the Tuesday.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. When we come back from break, I want to talk to you about the compensation issue, but we'll be right back.
This season, say happy holidays to your customers the personal way. Get your personalized corporate holiday greeting cards now at Idea Lab Studios, and we'll give you the design at 50% off with orders of 500 or more. Get your 2012 calendars ready too with custom desk, wall, and pocket calendars. Idea Lab Studios, where ideas take shape. Call us today at 223-6386 or visit our website at www.idealabstudios.com.
So why should you shop at CGI? Because they have it all. At CGI, they offer every promotional product you can dream of. T-shirts, pens, key holders, mugs, signs, full-color banners, dickies, trophies and awards, jerseys, rubber stamps, embroidery, and so much more. When they say everything, they mean everything. All printed in their facility in Orange Walk with the highest quality at the best prices using state-of-the-art equipment. At CGI, they want you to have the best shopping experience possible. They are the promotional product powerhouse you need to get the job done. CGI looks forward to serving you. Call 322-2282 or 422-0151. CGI, products that promote.
Introducing eZone Belize, the fastest, most reliable way to ship internet purchases and just about anything to Belize. It's easy, affordable, and fast. We provide you with a personal U.S. address and ship twice a week direct to Belize for as low as $1.55 U.S. Ship it safely and reliably with eZone Belize. Call us at 322-2283 for details and start shipping today, or visit our website at getezone.com.
Today's world is filled with opportunities. Travel to exotic lands.
Things to do with your loved ones. Perhaps build your own new home.
Start that can't-miss new business.
Send your kids to college.
Enjoy your grandkids when that time comes. And if you could gaze into a crystal ball right now, you might just see how you can make these dreams come true.
Ah, there they are. The professionals at RF&G Life Insurance. Protect your dreams with many life insurance options.
Pension plans, individual and group health insurance.
Also individual or group plans that help you pay for your dreams.
Speak to the professionals at RF&G Life Insurance today. Because in life, it pays to get it right.
RF&G Life Insurance is a member of the Roe Group of Companies.
Thank you for joining us for the Business Perspectives this evening. If you're just joining us, we are talking to the private sector players affected by the 8th Amendment. And my guests are the former chair of BTL, Mr. Dean Boyce, and the former CEO of BEL, Mr. Lin Young. And just before we went to break, we were talking about the BEL situation and how, basically how it all went down. and you were saying that you had very little notice that your company was to be nationalized by the government of Belize. And after 2 years, we're still wrangling about that issue. But more to the point, all the lawyers in this case tell us that we need to get to the matter of compensation quicker or sooner rather than later, because the longer we take, the more it's going to cost us. So I ask you, Mr. Boyce, what's it going to take to get to compensation?
Well, for a start, we don't necessarily want compensation. We, and I'm speaking on behalf of the BTL Employees Trust, we owned almost a quarter of BTL, and if we wish to sell some of those shares for the benefit of the employees, then that's up to the Employees Trust. There shouldn't be an external factor telling us that we have to sell all the shares. And particularly given the fact that this is a 100% Belizean benefit entity, it seems unreasonable, seems to go against the objectives of even the nationalization process, that you should take away shares which are going to benefit Belizeans and potentially sell them to Argentinians or whichever investor that they were looking at not so long ago. So, so for a start, the compensation, there shouldn't necessarily be compensation. We've been trying to get the shares back. The Court of Appeal said we were entitled to get the shares back and very briefly gave us the shares back. So compensation's an issue, and we can talk about what's happened on that side, but as a primary focus here, we're trying to get the shares back.
Gotcha. Okay. But as it relates to the issue of compensation, I would like to play a clip from a previous show and get your respective opinions on it.
Okay.
And I asked the question because the word expropriation has been tossed around in the BTL discussion because there has been absolutely no compensation yet, and it's been, I think, about 2 years or so.
But I don't think the timeline is a determining factor in the case of BTL. In all honesty, firstly, we know very well that there is an intent to compensate. The timeline, you cannot compensate for something until you have decided that I have taken it. And there has been constant legal challenge. So who do you compensate if the idea is not to collect?
Who runs the company?
No, if the idea is not to collect,
I understand.
then I cannot pay you. If you don't want to collect from me, how do I pay you? You want back the asset. So until we agree that you can no longer get back the asset and you must take the compensation, then the idea of compensation is a moot point. And so the timeline, to my mind, does not start to run until all parties agree the asset will not revert and compensation is the way out.
So, based on what you just said.
So he's basically saying that until the discussions are concluded with respect to whether we are supposed to get the shares back, he has he doesn't need to consider the compensation. That is what he's saying.
Yes.
The courts disagreed with him. Our lawyers say in standard practices that these discussions will take place in parallel. It could be some time before we conclude one or the other, but even the local courts, the Supreme Court here, instructed the government to make a declaration with respect to the amount of compensation, even though at that stage we were still pursuing the process of trying to recover the shares. So I mean, I hear what was said, but I don't believe that stacks up.
That's exactly the point. The point was made. How can you try to compensate somebody who doesn't want to be compensated?
They also said that there is absolutely no way we are going to get the shares back. They said that several times, right? Very loudly, that we're not going to get the shares back. If they knew we were not going to get the shares back, right, and they knew that they could renationalise as many times as they liked to make sure we never got the shares back, right, it seems reasonable that they should have then offered some compensation as an alternative.
Would you have been amenable to the compensation discussion at the outset, or at least further along in the process than it was?
Well, even at the outset, if they'd made an offer and it was an offer that we could have considered, then we would have considered it because it was there. We'd have been stupid not to. Eventually, I think it was at the beginning of this year, it was until the beginning of this year, based upon one of the reports that they're talking about, you've got to go back to 2010. That was the year where they offered the shares to the general public. And they said that they had gone through a valuation exercise for the company and that the shares were worth $6 a share. And that as a special deal to the Social Security Board and to Belizeans, they give them a discount and they would sell it to them at $5 a share.
Correct.
At the same time, the report that they're now referring to and was used, the valuation of $1.46 was submitted to the court, was sent to me in a letter saying, this is what we believe the shares are worth. So, they're saying that the shares were worth $1.46 at August 2009, but
you bought it
somehow or another, miraculously, they had increased the value of the company 300% by the time they were sold to the Social Security Board.
In 2010, yeah. That one is still unexplained. We discussed that at the last show, and that still perplexes me. But Lynn, let's get to the BEL issue.
Yeah.
What happened in the BEL matter?
Well, you say hindsight is
always 2020.
2020. So when I look back at what went on with BEL, it's obvious to me that, and the Prime Minister said it in the House, that his government always felt that public utilities should be owned by the government. And I remember the first meeting I had with the Public Utilities Commission.
Can I ask both of you though, was this a policy perspective that was represented in the manifestos?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't. This was, as far as the two of you are concerned, completely
out of the blue.
New to.
Well, it wasn't out of the blue from me, because before I was CEO, I was finance manager under the previous UDP government when a couple of investors had expressed interest in buying into the company, and then Prime Minister Manuel Esquivel said that his policy is that the government and people of Belize should always own a majority shares in the utility.
Okay.
And I remember saying back then that, as with land, you could insist that the ownership must be local, but once locals own shares, you cannot stop them from
reselling it, sure.
And in fact, constitutionally, you cannot say that somebody cannot buy land or buy property because they're not Belizean or that sort of thing. So, so I suppose the 8th Amendment is to try to address all of that. But so from back then, I think I was in the early 90s, I knew that then Prime Minister Esquivel felt that way. And the former chairman of BEL, Mr. Vasquez, back then he always said that he felt that the company should be owned by Belizeans. And he also said that the hydro companies should be owned by Belizeans.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't a complete surprise to me. Also, like I said, the first time I met with the Public Utilities Commission, the first question Mr. Vasquez asked me was, is Fortis prepared to sell the company? And I told him, I suppose if you make him an offer, or a reasonable offer, and I think, I don't remember which one of the commissioners said it, might have been Mr. Vasquez, but he said, well, what if the PUC forces the company into a position where Fortis has to sell? So I didn't take it seriously, but no, in looking back in hindsight, that is exactly what happened.
This is a deliberate strategy to force the investor to divest of his interest in the utility.
Yes, and I think it's deliberate to force them to divest in a way that they as cheap as possible.
Of course.
Yeah, and this is just my own opinion based on what has unfolded. Right? So, you know, in hindsight, I look back at it now.
That is extremely unfortunate if that is the case.
It is, and I think the record shows it because all of this was, you know, came out in the court records.
So what about, again, what about the purported public interest issue here, which in your case is, you know, safeguarding the constancy of supply and making sure that light bills go down, and I'm going to ask
if you look at how things evolved,
Uh-huh.
right? In 2008, when oil prices went up to, I think, like $140 a barrel, and the company was buying power from Mexico at a more expensive rate than the company was selling to customers.
Right.
So the company was bleeding.
Yeah.
So the company was forced to apply for an increase in rates. And I remember meeting with the Prime Minister then and saying, listen, this is temporary. These oil prices will not last because the whole world is going to go into a recession because of this. And oil prices will tumble. So I told him the company only needs about $20 million to get through this. I suggested we may not have to raise rates. Maybe we can sit down with Fortis and discuss a short-term loan, which is something we had done before with the previous government. And I said we could get through it. They didn't. They refused. And they refused to give the rate increase. And as a result, the company ended up losing money, falling in default of some of its debt covenants. Once the company was in default of its covenants, it could not borrow any more money. Under its covenants, it could not borrow money. It could not raise any finances.
Sure.
As it turned out, the oil prices did drop at the end of the year. So by early the following year, the company was getting back on its foot. The PUC amended the 2008 order to order a reduction of 15%, which would have been a reduction of $30 million per year in revenues, which would have made the company insolvent right away. So we ran to the courts, and we got an injunction to stop the PUC from doing that. And that injunction remained in place until recently. Right? That was in 2009. After that, we met with the Prime Minister at the suggestion of the government-appointed directors. And this is different from BTL because, remember, the government had 4 directors on the board. And the chairman of the board is Mr. Williams, who is the Prime Minister's law partner.
Yeah.
You know, so even as I hear the government saying BL was doctoring its books, etc., but there's an audit committee in BL that is headed by Mr. Williams. The other member of the audit committee is Mr. Dylan Renault, the chairman of the NTUCB, and 1 Fortis director. So there are 2 liaison directors, one from the union and one from the government, and the Fortis director on the audit committee. And the audit committee approves every financial statement that the company puts out. Right? So it just goes to show what's happening there.
Yeah.
Well, the government directors suggested that we should try and work this thing out with the government. We looked at the numbers and we said, listen, if the PUC were to rescind this order, the oil prices have dropped. When we looked at the numbers, the rates should have been lowered by 2 cents. So we went to the government and we suggested, listen, I know it sounds crazy, but this is true.
Yeah.
We went to the government, we met with the cabinet, we said, listen, we can resolve this now. All we need is for the PUC to rescind that order. We can set the rates now. We can forget about the losses the company has had over the last couple of years. You would have a 2 cents reduction in the rates on a go-forward basis. I said, if you want, you could freeze the rates for the next 2 years while we redo the regulations.
And you offered this when? Help me with the timeline.
2009.
Okay.
And I said, no, we hadn't discussed it with Fortis. It was just, I had mentioned to Fortis that, listen, I want to try to see if I can find a solution to this. They said, Lane, if you can come up with something, we're willing to talk.
Okay.
Right? So I explained to the government, I haven't any commitment from Fortis, but I'm pretty sure I can sell them on something like this or close just to get this mess behind us. So you would have actually a 2 cents reduction in rates and it would be frozen until the next election.
Right.
So I felt, well, okay, They said no.
They said no.
Not only did they say no,
Uh-huh.
but 2 months later, they increased the company's tax by the same amount of the reduction.
We're going to go to break and take up this discussion when we come back. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Zaina, and my life moves fast. I need an internet mobile solution that's fast, affordable, and easy to access. Thank goodness for Smart Smooth 3G portable internet modem. Check this out. Now I can get mobile broadband at fast speed. I can download my emails, update my status. All I need is this little USB modem. So go ahead, sign up for Smart's 3G mobile internet modem today and get moving while staying connected to the fastest 3G network in Belize.
Smart, bringing people together.
Believe it's all possible at Quartz. Believe that you could win up to a $30,000 dream home makeover courtesy World a well-deserved holiday at Oxley Spa from Mabe. Believe that you could get the best brands at the best prices guaranteed, and that you can only pay $1 down. All of these and more possible at Quartz, and that you can believe. Quartz, bringing value home. Certain conditions apply.
And welcome back. So, Lynn, before we went to break, you said, and
was
please
halfway
correct
through
me
the
if I'm
story.
wrong, yeah, but I have to reiterate because it's so interesting. You said you went to the government with a proposal to reduce the rates
Yes.
by 2 cents, but a reduction
It was
nevertheless.
about 6%.
And you said to them, you can even freeze it up to the point of the next general elections.
Yeah.
And you left that discussion with some measure of comfort that perhaps that would have been
Well, I
accepted.
was hopeful that it would be accepted, and the feedback I got, I thought that the ministers and
Well,
the government
amenable.
looked.
Uh-huh.
It's what I gather is that the Public Utilities Commission actually said no, the government should put more penalties on BL.
And a month later,
Well, the tax rate for BL was the only tax rate that was changed, and the company's taxes was increased by $10 million, right? So per year on an annual basis. So interestingly enough, now coming on into 2010, what happened is that one of the reasons why we felt also we could sustain the lower rates was that we knew VACA was coming online and Belcogen, which both of them are producing power at a cheaper rate than Mexico.
yeah, yeah.
So we knew that the cost of power
Would
should
go
come
down.
down. Well, as it turned out, in 2010, Belcogen had a lot of problems in the early half of 2010. And in addition to that, and then going on to 2011, that continued. And 2011, we had one of the longest and deepest dry seasons that we've had in years, right?
Yeah.
So coming on to the second quarter in 2011, the prices from Mexico started going up again. I think oil prices started approaching $100 a barrel again. And we were paying Mexico prices that were the same as what we were charging customers. So we were just trying to shovel money from customers to Mexico.
Right.
So we were in a serious cash crunch. The government had put an LC in place to guarantee our credit with Mexico. We had a $5 million credit with Mexico. We suggested to the government if they would double the credit, we could make it to the rains. We just needed to make it to the rainy season because we could get as much as 10 million US credit from Fortis through BCO. As a matter of fact, right now BL owes Fortis as much as 10 million US, which is what is helping BL to stay afloat through this difficult time. So, and as we pointed out, as soon as the rains come, we would be getting cheaper hydropower. Belcogen should have been out of its problems. I think they're out of it by now. So it was a temporary thing. And so the Prime Minister we couldn't borrow money because of the problems we had with the PUC. The banks refused to lend us money. The banks had frozen our overdraft. Right? So I suggested to the Prime Minister, listen, the only way out of this is for you to prepay your bills. If the government prepay 2 months of bills, that should see us through.
Yeah.
Which the government did. And the Prime Minister had said in the air that if we come back from our money, he would have to take drastic action. Well, we knew we didn't need to go back. Because as it turns out, by the end of June, the rains started coming. But he did not wait for us to go back. He just went ahead and expropriated the company.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you recall, but he had said that he would do it by such and such a date. And in fact, he didn't wait until the end of June. He went ahead. So in my view, it was the opportune moment for them. Now, be that as it may, you know, if a government thinks that the public utility should be owned by the government, I don't agree, but, you know, they're elected and that's what they feel, and that's fine. My disappointment was the way it was done.
The process, yeah.
You know, the process, I think it was horrible for the country, and I think it's bad for a government to act in that manner, and a regulator to act in the manner it is.
Absolutely.
I think it's also bad for the government to keep saying that the company was manufacturing its books. And like I said, you know, when you consider that the 4 of the 9 directors are local directors, and they're upstanding gentlemen too.
They are.
You know, I mean, Mr. Dylan Renner is somebody I have tremendous respect for him. He has a business degree. He sits on the audit committee, and I tell you, they ask very difficult questions, and they check every little thing, you know, before they approve it.
Yeah.
So that's disappointing. But be that as it may, like I said, that's what the government wants. I think it's in a different position from the BTL situation because Fortis has made it clear. In fact, the message to the government was, listen, if you want to buy the company, we'll take it, we'll sell it at book value.
So that's the next question. Are you going to challenge in the courts?
Well, of course, it's not me, right? It's Fortis.
Yeah.
And I'm doing some work for Fortis right now with respect to the evaluation because they're doing the evaluation. They're going to put forward their compensation claim to the government.
Okay.
As I said before, they had already, before the expropriation, they had said to the government, we are willing to sell at book value, but we think we need to adjust for the regulatory taking that the PEC did. And the government did not respond to that. And also, I know through their lawyer, Fortis had sent an official thing to the government, say, listen, you want to buy, make us an offer, and there was no response to that either. So,
so you're gonna take this matter to court. If you take this matter to court, it's not going to be to, as in the case of BTL, to get back the asset, but it would likely be the issue of compensation.
Yeah, again, I can't speak for Fortis on these matters because, as I said publicly, I drove the bus. I didn't own the bus, and I don't speak for the owners of the bus, right? But I do know that their position has always been they don't invest in places where they are not wanted.
Exactly. Exactly.
And they don't need to because, you know, as they've said time and time again, the investment in Belize is only about 2% of the assets. So it's just not worth the trouble.
Absolutely.
You know, for them.
And that is, you know, that is really unfortunate in light of the bigger picture.
But also in the bigger picture too, I think Fortis is really it's the largest privately owned, investor-owned utility in Canada, and it has an excellent reputation in Canada.
Does.
So I think the Canadian government, I know, is not at all happy with how.
And considering that
it has operations around the Caribbean.
It has operations in Cayman, in Turks and Caicos, in the U.S.
Those are the two I know.
And all over Canada. So it's a pretty big.
So weird about the only inhospitable climate that we found in the region.
And the comments about.
I won't want to say that
because. And the comments about management fees.
No, there are no management fees in BEL. Because Fortis took the view that they were investing for the long haul. I think they actually put in more money than they took out in dividends. They felt that, you know, in the long run, they would turn around the company, which happened, by the way, because just a couple of months before the expropriation, the Caribbean Association of Electric Utilities, which never got on the news, I don't know, the media in Belize is pretty opaque sometimes, but anyway, BEL won an award for the utility in the Caribbean with the least amount of outages.
You did.
And the lowest
Congratulations,
rates.
we did not know
And
this.
the lowest rates.
And the lowest rates.
Yes.
In the Caribbean.
Yes.
Yeah.
There will be, you're subsidizing.
While our peers are awarding us with that, the government is saying, oh, it's a bad company, we need to take it over. So go figure.
So just yesterday, I believe, the Prime Minister promised that there will be lower rates by January 2012.
He should. Like I said in 2009, as I said in 2009, that I suggested the government, you remember, 1 week after the expropriation, nobody noticed, but the PUC rescinded the decision.
What, the taxation? Which decision?
They rescinded the decision that was causing the company all the problems. It was rescinded 1 week after the government took over the company. So with that decision rescinded, BEL should be able to access financing, number one. Number two, the oil prices, oil prices are still kind of high, but VACA is online, Belcogen is online, and thirdly, the government, if you take a company and not pay for it, you can set the rates wherever you want.
Whatever you want. So
the investors will need to make a return, because investors get their money from the markets. People put in shares, or they borrow, or they put out bonds or whatever. So the investors will have to pay for their source of money. But if a government just takes a company without paying for it, then it can charge whatever rates.
So what you're saying is that essentially it doesn't really matter, because the companies are going to be propped up anyway by the taxpayers of Belize.
It will be propped up. The government will probably string out, I think, they will probably string out the compensation issue for as long as they can, so that they will reduce the rates to wherever they want. The bill will come maybe 2 or 3 years down the road when they have to pay for the company, depending on what is agreed on.
But again, like the BTL issue, would it not cost us more the longer they take to arrive at compensation?
But you're talking from an economics point of view. From a political point of view, if it happens after the next elections, then that's great.
Point taken. Point taken, sir. So this is a really good segue into then the public-private management discussion. And in the case of utilities, I mean, there is an argument on the one hand that because in some cases there are natural monopolies, that perhaps they're better suited to public administration. However, and you alluded to it earlier,
there is a difference between power and telecommunications. Telecommunications doesn't really have any international boundaries anymore. It's a business of scale, it's a business of software, it's a business of operating over the internet, which, interestingly enough, the government have now classed internet as non-telecommunications from the perspective of taxation. I have no idea how they can say it's not telecommunications, because Skype and Vonage and so on, they're all operated through the internet.
Yes.
So certainly telecommunications is very competitive. It's a global industry. Certainly BTL is one of the very few that is now standalone and isn't part of a big international operation. Even BTC in Bahamas, which was hanging out for such a long time, was just sold off, and the government sold off the majority stake to Cable and Wireless within the region, because there's a recognition that it's very difficult for a small standalone business to really make it in these days. You need to be able to bring in the services that much faster. You need to be able to reduce the cost of your equipment and all of your services, and you can do that if you're buying in bulk, and BTL as a standalone business cannot do that. And if you look at, again, going back to the point I made right at the beginning, what's in the best interest of the population, it may be that they want to invest in something like BTL or BEL, but they clearly can't afford to buy the majority stake. The government doesn't have the money, and if you said to the general population, well, if you had a few $100 million to spend, what would you spend it on? Would you buy BEL and BTL, or would you try and improve schooling or cut crime? Then it's a fairly straight choice. Most people would decide cutting crime and education, that's right, and more important. If you said to them, well, look, if you can invest still, you could put your savings, you could put your pensions in the company, and they can be reasonably secure, probably more secure in a company like BEL than BTL, that could tomorrow lose a substantial amount of its value if it is not able to compete with the likes of Vonage and Skype over the internet. And therefore being a sort of having a big foreign investor coming in, and they might brand it, right, Cable and Wireless or Verizon or whatever they may brand it, but if the guy in the street now gets access and he gets a whole range of new services that they can now afford to roll out, because the cost for BTL was maybe too high for it to roll it out, but for a big conglomeration it's not a big deal. If they can get it for a fraction of the cost they're paying at the moment, if the government's going to benefit from all this hard currency being pumped into the country, and they're going to get taxation on higher revenue levels, as well as the transfer of the sale of the shares in the first place. There's a lot of benefits in looking at an international operator. Doesn't mean to say that's necessarily the way to go, But the disappointing thing about this discussion is that there's been no discussion. It's all been about, well, what else is being sneaked into this Ninth Amendment
Exactly.
through the back door? And there actually hasn't been any real discussion about the alternatives, right, for the country and what's in the best interest of the country. And I see, the economists, supposed economists coming in, they don't understand the telecommunications, the international telecommunications industry. So how can they make a judgment?
Yeah.
And the fact that globally the world is moving towards a fully privatized competitive environment. Sure, you can go to some of the Arab countries and some of the communist countries, and it's a little different.
That's troubling, isn't it?
Right, but in a country where we'd privatized and opened the market, right, we're now going backwards. Is going against the trends in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens over time, but yeah. Well, with electricity, it's. I think it's up in the air, really. I've seen well-run government utilities, and I've seen poorly run government utilities. I've seen well-run privately owned utilities and poorly run privately owned utilities. So, from my own perspective, my experience with BL when it was run by the government is that it was far better run when it was run by Fortis.
Right.
But that's not necessarily because it was private. That's because Fortis has been in the business for so long, and Fortis is one of the top utilities in Canada. So they really
brought
so they brought a lot of expertise.
But there are a lot of spin-off issues. You have a company like BEL and BTL, owned by the government of the day. It is possible to give contracts to, not on best practice, but to the ones that you want. You can employ additional staff, as BTL's, I think, headcount's gone up 10% in the last couple of years, despite the fact that I know that the number we had was reasonably efficient for the output. There haven't been any price reductions. This nonsense about, well, half price internet for half speed internet. Well, it's just half. You're just getting the half, guys. You're getting the half a loaf for half the price.
You could jump at the bottom, not the bottom.
And that's all that's happened in 2 years. You can buy the loyalty of the employees. I'm not saying that happens, but I'm saying that that's possible. The staff potentially, where do they go? If they've got a dispute with the board, do they go to the Ministry of Labour, right, for a sort of a decision? That's a very difficult
one good thing is that there's no need for a regulator now.
Well, I was going to say, what now is the role of the regulator?
Well, really there shouldn't be none, but what I think is going to happen is that the government is going to hide behind the regulator and say, oh, well, the regulator, if the rates have to go up, they will hide behind the regulator and say, well, the regulator is doing it, but the government controls the regulator. But, with respect to the, like I said, my experience in the past is that there are two things. One is, as Dean mentioned, the cronyism, and secondly,
patronage.
one of our biggest problems at BL, two of our biggest problems, one was getting capital to finance big projects was very difficult, especially with a government, where the country's credit rating is so poor.
Yeah.
We really had to rely on Fortis when we were going out for loans. And so when Fortis kind of pulled back, it put the company in a bad position with respect to getting money. But the second problem you have in these utilities with governments is that ministers change and governments change, and every time it changes, and the board changes, and every time you have a change, you have changes in policies, you have
senior staff
get chopped, people living in fear of their jobs because their family is blue or their family is red, and that's why I walked away, to be honest, because it's not that I don't think that the company has very good staff, and in fact, when I left, I had a good conversation with the chairman, and I had a conversation with the Prime Minister about the management, and I made some suggestions which I still have followed, which I think is good for the company. So I think they have all intentions of trying to do a good job. I know they do, and that's good for the country. But like I said to the Prime Minister, even if you have all good intentions, you won't be Prime Minister forever, and UDP won't be the government forever, and neither will the PUP, and it's going to be a back and forth, and over time, I think it's going to start going down eventually again. But having said that, the company is right now in very good shape physically. All the capital, the Prime Minister complained that we were spending capital that we didn't need to spend. Last year, you see, an electric utility, there are a lot of big items that takes long to deliver. So when the company changed, for example, from having a lot of generating plants all over the country, we shut down those plants to get cheaper power from Hydro in Mexico. Then you had to put substations in each town. These are big transformers that delivers to that town.
Yeah.
You have about 40-something substations now. If one of those transformers go down, it takes about 6 months to replace it. You can't have a town out for 6 months, which happened in Belmapan in 2008. We were supposed to change to upgrade the substation in Belmapan, but because of the problems with the PUC and because we couldn't get money, we couldn't. So what we had to do was to run the mobile substation. We bought a mobile substation, I think it was about $7 million. And then the chairman of the PUC gets up and said, BL bought a piece of equipment that it doesn't use. Well, it's one of those pieces of equipment that when you need it, if you don't have it, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
So you buy it, hoping that you will never need to use it. But you know, if one of those substations goes down, as happened in Belmapan will have been out of power for like 8 or 9 months.
Yeah.
You know, if we did not have that mobile substation.
The problem with all of this is the impact it has on the everyday person in the streets, and that ultimately is what is the most important thing.
Yes.
And if you're talking about developing the country, it's about investment. And where you have a situation where companies are nationalized, the justification is questionable and has been questioned, when the courts will make decisions and they will be ignored by the government, where the ground rules change all the while, and particularly in industries like telecommunications and power, where there's a huge investment and you have to look at long-term returns.
It'll catch
you
up
need stability. You need stability.
But the other issue is that, you know, the utilities are platform industries for the growth of other of other business pursuits. So for the private sector, this is a big issue. If these companies are not well run, it can affect and reverberate across the private sector going forward.
And those are some of the things that got me so upset, you know, because I told the Prime Minister, I said, listen, if you think that the company should be owned by locals or whatever, then have a transition period.
Yeah.
Have a transition. For example, Barbados, when Barbados privatized its utility, Locadia was a company that bought, I think they bought like 60 or 70% in it. One of the conditions was that Locadia had to offer 10% of its shares annually to local investors. And there was a set formula as to what the price would be. And over 10, 15 years, Locadia was whittled right down to under 20% until they sold it. So basically, the government set a program in place where the foreign investor is in with all the expertise, and over a period of time, it shifted to, and that's why I brought up the point that I think really the issue is local versus foreign ownership. But they should have done it in a way that's sustainable and that won't hurt the company. And that's my big concern about it.
It has to be about partnerships.
And with that, I'm sorry, we have to take the final break. We'll be right back with final words.
This season, say happy holidays to your customers the personal way. Get your personalized corporate holiday greeting cards now at Idea Lab Studios, and we'll give you the design at 50% off with orders of 500 or more. Get your 2012 calendars ready too with custom desk, wall, and pocket calendars. Idea Lab Studios, where ideas take shape. Call us today at 223-6386 or visit our website at www.idealabstudios.com.
The Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Western Union, has recently been distinguished by receiving the 5-Star Quality Service Award from Western Union.
The 5-Star Quality Service Award signifies that the Chamber holds the gold standard in outstanding customer service, in being courteous, efficient, and transparent in the services we provide.
Can you receive superior customer service at any of our chamber locations?
Yes. Come and visit us today!
And welcome back for final words. Mr. Boyce, I'll start with you.
The nationalization as a subject was a very valid one. It's a political one. It is one that has to be done in a very objective rather than an emotional way, and it should have been considered fully before any action was taken place, and then the implementation of it, if that is the way the country decides it will take, should have been done on a very agreeable way as a partnership, and the implementation therefore wouldn't have been quite so damaging on the economy, the investment climate, and the good name of Belize as a whole.
Yeah.
No, I have to concur with Dean. I think my biggest concern continues to be the effect on the country and the economy. In the 8th Amendment, I don't know if it's going to hold up, but I just hope things work out. We are all Belizeans here.
We are. And
we're going to have governments that's going to do crazy things from time to time, and we're going to have to fix it. So this is just another one as far as I see it. I've said before, I think our country is a rather immature democracy, and some of these things are going pains. It's a shame that we have to go through such difficult times to learn these lessons, but I think time will show that this wasn't the best way to do things, even if the intentions were good. And we're going to have to try and get this fixed. The investment climate is shot, and the economy is going to be hurt for a while.
Yeah.
The private sector is crying. So this is really a bad time to do things the way it was done. But I hope that, with time, we're going to get this thing fixed. And I do hope that all the work we put in BL doesn't unravel.
Absolutely. And so to wrap up the series, I'd like to leave you with a clip from our President's opening remarks at a recent Mixer event at the Chamber.
And also keep in mind that destroying whole industries, be they sugar, citrus, energy, or any other, because of petty infighting and narrow-minded bullying, is a thing we can no longer afford, not in this globally connected economy. It's time we Belizeans and we business people take charge and do what is necessary to begin to change attitudes and start the task of restoring confidence in our economy to attract, and here again I stress the word credible investment. In this way, we can make Belize into a shining example to beat our regional neighbors. Let's just do it and insist that it be done.
Thank you for watching. Good night.